Right now, as winter cold seeps through your walls and your heating bill climbs higher every month, there is a piece of fabric hanging in nearly every home across America that could be trapping heat and slashing energy costs. But almost nobody is using it correctly. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly how to transform an ordinary curtain into a thermal barrier so effective that it can outperform expensive wall insulation, using nothing more than a $15 material and a technique so simple that it takes about 20 minutes to set up. The trick involves positioning and layering fabric in a way that creates what physicists call a dead airspace, the exact same insulating principle that keeps Arctic explorers alive in sub-zero temperatures and that engineers at NASA use to protect spacecraft from the brutal thermal extremes of orbit. But before we get to the solution, you need to understand the invisible problem that is bleeding heat and money from your home every single night, a problem that exists in virtually every house and apartment across North America and Europe, but remains completely misunderstood by the people paying for it. If you live anywhere that gets cold in winter, whether that is Minnesota, Vermont, Ontario, the northern United Kingdom, or even southern states during cold snaps, you have almost certainly felt the frustration of a room that just will not stay warm. You crank up the thermostat, the furnace runs constantly, you can hear the heating system working overtime, yet that bedroom, that living room, those spaces near windows feel perpetually cold and drafty. Energy companies and contractors will tell you the problem is your windows are old and need replacing, or your walls lack sufficient insulation, or you need to upgrade to a high-efficiency heating system. All of that advice is technically correct, but it also requires you to spend anywhere from thousands to tens of thousands of dollars, putting it completely out of reach for most homeowners and entirely impossible for renters who cannot modify the property. So here's the question that almost nobody in the home improvement industry wants you to ask. What if the single biggest pathway for heat loss in your home is not your walls or your attic, or even air leaks around your doors? What if it is your windows? And what if the solution does not require replacing them at all? According to research published by the United States Department of Energy, windows are responsible for approximately 25 to 30% of residential heating energy use in cold climates. Even modern double-pane windows have an R value, which is the measure of thermal resistance, of only about R2 to R3. Compare that to a properly insulated wall, which typically has an R value of R13 to R20, and you start to see the problem. Your windows are basically thermal holes in your building envelope, allowing heat to pour out at a rate 5 to 10 times faster than your walls. Single-pane windows, which are still present in millions of older homes across the United States, Canada, and the UK, have R values as low as R1, making them essentially useless as insulation. Every square foot of window glass is radiating precious heat energy directly to the cold outdoors, and your heating system has to work constantly just to replace what is being lost. This is why rooms with large windows or multiple windows feel colder than interior rooms, and why your heating bills spike so dramatically during winter months. To understand why this happens and how to stop it, we need to go back more than a century to a discovery in thermal physics that quietly revolutionized how we think about heat and insulation. In the late 19th century, scientists studying heat transfer discovered that air, when trapped in a thin layer and prevented from circulating, is actually one of the best insulators found in nature. The reason is simple. Air molecules are terrible conductors of heat because they are spread far apart and move randomly, so heat energy transfers very slowly through still air. But the moment that air starts moving, convection kicks in and hot air rises while cold air sinks, creating circulation currents that rapidly transfer heat from warm surfaces to cold ones. This observation led to one of the most important principles in building science and cold weather survival. The most effective insulation is not a single thick material, but rather multiple thin layers with trapped air spaces between them. This is why down jackets and sleeping bags work so well. The down feathers create thousands of tiny air pockets that trap body heat while preventing convection. This is why double and triple pane windows outperform single pane. The air gap between the glass layers provides far more insulation than the glass itself. And this is exactly why a properly hung thermal curtain with an air gap between the fabric and the window can provide an R value increase of R2 to R4, effectively doubling or even tripling the insulating performance of your existing window without replacing a single pane of glass. Now here's where the story takes a genuinely fascinating turn. Because the most effective curtain technique for trapping heat was not developed by interior designers or home improvement experts. It was refined over centuries by people living in the coldest inhabited places on Earth where staying warm was literally a matter of life and death. In Scandinavia, particularly in Sweden, Norway, and Finland, where winter temperatures regularly plunge below 0 Fahrenheit and daylight nearly disappears for months, traditional homes have used heavy multi-layer curtains and textile hangings for hundreds of years as primary thermal barriers. These curtains were not decorative, they were survival equipment. Historical examples from 18th and 19th century Nordic homes show curtains made from multiple layers of wool, felt, and heavy woven fabric, often lined with animal skins or additional textile layers, and hung in a specific way that created an insulating air pocket between the fabric and the cold window glass. During the energy crises of the 1970s, when heating oil prices skyrocketed and governments across North America and Europe launched major energy conservation initiatives, building scientists began studying these traditional techniques and testing them with modern materials and measurement tools. What they discovered was remarkable. A heavy curtain hung directly against a window provides modest insulation, perhaps R1 to R1.5 of added thermal resistance. But that exact same curtain hung on a rod positioned several inches away from the window, creating a sealed air gap, and fitted tightly to the wall on all sides to prevent air circulation, can provide R3 to R4.5 of insulation. That is nearly triple the performance from the exact same piece of fabric, simply by changing how it is positioned. The key is preventing convection. When cold air touches the inside surface of your window glass, it cools down, becomes denser, and sinks. Warmer room air then flows in to replace it, creating a convection loop that continuously carries heat from your room to the cold glass where it radiates away to the outdoors. A curtain hung flat against the window interrupts this somewhat, but air can still circulate around the edges and through the fabric weave, so the convection loop continues. But a curtain hung several inches away from the window with sealed edges at the top, bottom, and sides creates a dead airspace where convection cannot occur. The air trapped between the curtain and the window quickly reaches equilibrium temperature, stops moving, and becomes a highly effective insulating layer. The thicker and heavier the curtain fabric, the better it blocks radiant heat transfer as well, which is the other major mode of heat loss through windows. The result is a dramatic reduction in the total heat flow through that window, measurable with thermal imaging cameras and noticeable immediately in the comfort level of the room. Research conducted at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and published in academic journals on building science confirmed that insulated curtains with sealed edges can reduce heat loss through windows by 40 to 60%, depending on the window type and installation quality. In a typical home heating scenario, that translates to energy savings of 10 to 20% on total heating costs, sometimes more in rooms with extensive window area. Now let us talk about the specific materials and techniques that deliver these results, because this matters enormously. Not all curtains are created equal when it comes to thermal performance. Thin decorative curtains made from lightweight cotton or polyester provide almost no insulation. What you need is either a purpose-made thermal curtain, which typically consists of multiple fabric layers, with a dense fleece or foam core, or a heavy lined curtain made from thick fabric like velvet, wool, or heavy cotton, with an additional thermal or blackout lining sewn to the back. The best performing option is often a quilted or layered curtain, specifically marketed as a thermal curtain or insulated curtain. These are widely available at retailers like Target, Walmart, Amazon, and Bed Bath & Beyond, with prices typically ranging from $15 to $40 per panel depending on size and quality. For maximum effectiveness, you want curtains that are both wide enough to cover the entire window with several inches of overlap on each side and long enough to extend from above the window frame all the way to the floor or windowsill. Here's the installation technique that transforms these curtains from simple window coverings into serious thermal barriers. First, mount your curtain rod 3 to 6 inches away from the wall, not directly against the window frame. You can do this using standard curtain rod brackets with spacers, or by choosing an adjustable rod that naturally projects several inches from the wall. The goal is to create that critical air gap between the fabric and the glass. Second, make sure the rod extends at least 6 inches beyond the window frame on each side, so the curtains can overlap the wall and seal the edges when closed. Third, hang curtains that are slightly longer than the distance from the rod to the floor or sill. So when closed, they bunch slightly at the bottom, creating a seal rather than hanging with a gap underneath. Fourth, and this is crucial, add a valance or cornice board across the top of the window to seal the top edge and prevent warm room air from flowing up behind the curtain and creating a convection loop. A simple fabric valance attached with Velcro works perfectly and costs almost nothing. Fifth, use small fabric weights or magnetic hem weights sewn into the bottom edge of the curtain to keep it hanging straight and tight against the wall. You can buy curtain weights for a couple dollars at any fabric store, or improvise with small washers or coins sewn into the hem. The goal is to eliminate air gaps at the bottom where warm air can escape into the cold air pocket behind the curtain. When you put all these elements together, you create what building scientists call a well-sealed thermal curtain assembly, and the performance is genuinely impressive. During cold nights, you close the curtains fully, making sure the edges overlap tightly, and the air trapped between the fabric and the window becomes an insulating blanket. The interior surface of the curtain facing your room stays relatively warm because the dead airspace prevents heat from reaching the cold glass. Your room feels warmer, your heating system runs less, and your energy costs drop measurably. During the day, you can open the curtains to let in sunlight and natural light, and if you have south-facing windows, that solar heat gain provides free passive heating. Then as soon as the sun goes down and outdoor temperatures plunge, you close the curtains again to trap that warmth inside. One of the most common mistakes people make is buying thermal curtains but hanging them incorrectly, mounting them directly against the window frame with no air gap, or leaving large gaps around the edges. When installed that way, thermal curtains still help somewhat, but they deliver only a fraction of their potential performance. The air gap and edge sealing are not optional details. They are fundamental to how the physics works. This is the difference between a modest improvement and a dramatic transformation in thermal performance. Here is something that genuinely frustrates me. The same building science principles that explain why thermal curtains work so well have been known and documented for decades, yet the vast majority of people struggling with cold, drafty rooms and high heating bills have never heard this explained clearly. Energy auditors will recommend expensive window replacements costing thousands of dollars per window, but rarely mention that a $30 curtain installed correctly can capture much of that same benefit. The reason comes down to economics and industry incentives. Window replacement is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Contractors, manufacturers, and installers make substantial money on window upgrades, so they have strong motivation to promote that solution. Curtains, on the other hand, can be bought off the shelf and installed by anyone in 30 minutes with no professional help required, which means there is no ongoing service business and no one making big money promoting them. Additionally, most people think of curtains as decorative items, not as functional building components. Interior designers focus on aesthetics, color, and style rather than thermal performance, so the conversation around curtains rarely touches on insulation and energy savings. But the physics does not care about aesthetics or industry business models. Trapped air insulates regardless of who profits from telling you about it. Let me give you a concrete real-world example of what this looks like in practice. Imagine you have a bedroom with 2 large windows facing north. Every winter night, that room becomes uncomfortably cold despite the thermostat being set to a reasonable temperature. You have tried space heaters, extra blankets, draft stoppers under the door, but nothing really solves the problem. The windows are older double pane units that would cost around $800 each to replace, totaling $1,600 plus installation labor. Or you could spend $60 on 4 thermal curtain panels, $30 on 2 curtain rods with extended brackets, and an hour of your time to install everything properly with sealed edges and air gaps. The curtains add roughly R3.5 of insulation to each window, reducing heat loss by approximately 50%. The room immediately feels warmer and more comfortable. Your heating system runs less because it is not constantly fighting to replace heat pouring out through those windows. Over a single winter heating season, that $60 curtain investment could easily save you $100 to $200 in reduced heating costs depending on your local energy prices and climate. And unlike a window replacement that requires professional installation and permanent modification to your home, curtains are completely renter-friendly. You hang them, they work, and when you move, you take them with you. There is no drilling into window frames, no professional installation required, no permanent changes to the property. For homeowners, thermal curtains make sense as an immediate first step before considering more expensive upgrades. Even if you eventually do replace your windows, keeping thermal curtains provides additional insulation and allows you to boost thermal performance even further, creating a layered defense against heat loss. For renters and people on tight budgets, thermal curtains are often the single most cost-effective thermal upgrade available, delivering measurable comfort improvements and energy savings for a tiny upfront investment. There is also a useful secondary benefit that often gets overlooked. Heavy thermal curtains provide significant sound dampening, reducing outside noise from traffic, neighbors, and street activity. If you live in an urban area or near a busy road, the acoustic improvement alone can be worth the investment, and you get the thermal performance as a bonus. Now let us talk about what you should do right now, today, before the next cold snap hits and your heating bill spikes again. First, identify your coldest rooms and the windows that contribute most to heat loss. North and west facing windows in the northern hemisphere receive little to no solar heat gain in winter, but lose heat constantly, making them top priorities. Large windows and bay windows are also major heat loss culprits. Second, measure those windows carefully, noting both the width and height from the top of the frame to the floor or sill. Third, go online or visit a store like Target, Walmart, or Amazon and search for thermal curtains or insulated curtains. Look for products that explicitly mention thermal performance, multiple layers, or energy-saving features. Read reviews carefully and pay attention to comments about thickness and quality. Fourth, order curtains that are wide enough to overlap your window frame by at least 6 inches on each side and long enough to reach the floor with a little extra length. Fifth, purchase curtain rods that extend well beyond the window frame and use brackets or spacers to mount them several inches away from the wall. Sixth, when the curtains arrive, install them using the technique I described, creating sealed air gaps and eliminating circulation paths around the edges. Add a valance or cornice at the top, use weights at the bottom, and make sure the side edges overlap tightly against the wall when closed. Seventh, starting that very first cold night, close the curtains at sunset and leave them closed until morning. Pay attention to how the room feels compared to before. Most people report an immediate noticeable difference in comfort and a measurable drop in heating system runtime. If you are skeptical, and honestly skepticism is healthy, start with just one problem window or one cold room as a test. The total investment will be $20 to $40 in less than an hour of your time. If it works, and the science says it absolutely will, you can expand to other windows. If somehow it does not make a difference, you are out the cost of a pizza and you still have nice curtains. But I would wager that once you experience the difference in that first room, you will be measuring every other window in your house. There is something profoundly satisfying about solving a problem that has frustrated you for years using nothing more than fabric, physics, and a simple installation trick. We live in a world where the same principles that keep astronauts alive in space and explorers alive in the Arctic are available to you at your local department store for $15. The power to transform a cold, drafty room into a warm, comfortable space is hanging on a rack right now, waiting for you to bring it home and install it correctly. Yet millions of people continue to suffer through freezing bedrooms, astronomical heating bills, and the constant discomfort of homes that just will not stay warm, simply because nobody has explained this brilliantly simple solution in plain language. At Hidden Harvest, this is exactly what we do. We dig into the science, the history, and the practical applications of overlooked solutions that make real, measurable differences without requiring a fortune or a contractor. I am John A.G., and my mission is to put useful knowledge in your hands so you can take control of your comfort and your costs. The power to trap heat better than expensive insulation is literally a piece of fabric and 20 minutes of your time. That is not marketing hype. That is physics you can feel the moment you walk into the room. $15, 1 hour, and your coldest room becomes your coziest room. Stop paying to heat the outdoors and start keeping that warmth where it belongs.